So about 4 years ago, I was on a TEDx stage just like this one. I was 18, I was fiery, passionate, and on that stage there was a professor, a life coach, entrepreneur, and then there was me. I wasn't even passing algebra. I don't know how or why they let me on that stage, but it happened, I promise you. And I wanted to talk about mental health in the classroom and the difficulties that befell underprivileged kids trying to reach high levels in academia. Now, was I qualified to give this talk? Probably not, but I was an arrogant teenager. I was going to make it happen anyway. And the reason I wanted to make it happen is I was always the star student. 4.0, college credit, the works. But there's plenty of people that I knew very closely that were dealing with things that I could really only describe as pretty severe mental health problems. And I remember just feeling like an imposter in a certain sense. Who am I to receive praise from teachers and administrators while not having the ability to help the people that I truly cared about? And I remember walking by and seeing that TEDx flyer and thinking, maybe I can make a difference. Let me give a talk on mental health education. Maybe I can change a few people's lives. Maybe I can prove to my peers that I can give something valuable. Maybe I can even go viral in the process. How cool would that be? So I remember applying, getting accepted, and I went and started writing the talk. And I practiced it for about 3 months until the day finally came. I remember walking out onto that stage and looking out over the sea of red chairs, giving my talk triumphantly one last time. And I thought, I'm ready. I'm ready to make a difference. I'm ready to change people's lives. I'm ready to give a TEDx. And I know at this point, my talk, or my expectations for my talk, were so high. At this point, failure was not an option. And then it got canceled. I remember the organizer walking into the room just an hour before showtime and telling me that she was postponing the talk for 2 weeks due to a global health concern. And little did I know, when I walked off that stage, I would never give that talk again. And I remember how that made me feel, running to my mom and saying, they can't do this to me. This was supposed to be my big break. I was supposed to help all these people. I was supposed to be smart and make a difference. I was supposed to go viral. Mom, I can't go to college. I'm supposed to be doing podcasts around the country right now. And when that finally set in, yes, I did go to college. And I remember sitting there in my dorm room all disgruntled. Stupid school, not even taking my suggestions. And I remember thinking, you know what? I don't need school. School isn't going to teach me anything important. It's not going to get me to become the man that I really want to become. I got to put that on myself. I got to become better. And so in that moment, I was like, you know what? I've got it. I know what my problem is. I know why everything doesn't feel like it's coming together right now. I'm just broke, right? I just don't have any money. That's what my 20-year-old brain came up with. So I ran out of my dorm room and I hopped in my '03 Sable that was missing a hubcap, and I drove to Barnes & Noble, where for only $17, I bought the ticket to my future, or so I thought. That ticket was called Stock Trading for Dummies, and I set aside $200, threw it in the market, and waited. And I remember a month later pulling out my stock trading app and just thinking, this is going to be so cool. I can't wait to tell my mom how many times over I could pay off her house. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to be so smart and so successful. And I was actually surprised to see that I turned that $200 into $17.67. So I probably should have watched Wolf of Wall Street a few more times. I didn't get it the first time. But in that moment, I thought, okay, this sucks, but I'm not a quitter. I've doom scrolled Instagram enough times to know that Steve Jobs failed like 1 million times before he got big, right? So I'll just have to try something else. I started a business. It was a web design and logo design business. I remember my mom helped me get my first client. It was a rural supply store out in the middle of nowhere. I remember trudging through the mud and khakis and a white button-up just to put pictures on his website for $50. I didn't stay that low for long, though. Soon I was meeting clients at IHOP and doing jobs for maybe 100. And eventually I even learned bookkeeping, which is where I also learned that I wasn't making any money. And in fact, my company was crumbling at my feet. So maybe business isn't for me either. At this point, I'm 21. I'm still sad, broke. Feel like I haven't learned anything. And at the time, I was working as an intern at a local marketing firm, and I was recanting this entire story to one of my coworkers, telling her, man, if only I had just given that TEDx talk 4 years ago, would have just gone viral. I wouldn't have to have gone to college. I wouldn't have to be this failure right now. And I remember her response was just, why don't you just do it again? I was like, you could do that? That's awesome. So I took my lunch break, called the university, and next thing you know, I was the organizer of the local TEDx event. I spent the next year networking with people, learning sponsorships, learning how to put on an event and talk to people. And eventually I applied myself. And I remember when I got that acceptance letter that I was going to give a TEDx again. I was ecstatic. I remember running back to my apartment, dusting off my old laptop that had my talk in it 4 years ago, and reading it for the first time in all of those years. I remember the nostalgia washing over me as I read it 4 or 5 times and just thinking, man, this talk sucks. This is terrible. What I remember as this impactful piece systematically dismantling the problems with education through my own experience sounded more like an angry teenage manifesto full of complaining and finger pointing. And I realized in that moment that I couldn't give that talk today. And that terrified me because I thought, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to screw up this one shot again. But in that moment, I realized that I had a pretty unique experience. I'm able to have a conversation with my 18-year-old self. I have his thoughts right here. And I can ask him the questions that I genuinely wanted to know the answer to. Things like, why were you so mad? I'm mad now because I have to pay rent. Why are you mad? What was your problem with education, learning? Why did you think you were such a failure? What was the rush? And in that, I came to understand that the value that I thought I was supposed to deliver on this stage is not the value that I should deliver. And the value that I can deliver the best is value to him, that 18-year-old kid, anybody who thinks like him. So if you bear with me for a moment, I would love to have a conversation with him. If I had to sit him down right here and just talk to him, I'd just say, Matt, stay good looking first off. Second off, your arrogance, cocky, horribly misguided. But you are desperately passionate. And if I had to tell you to keep anything, that is the one thing I would tell you to keep. Because look at where it's gotten you. I realized in that moment that I'm that kid's hero. And my hero doesn't exist yet. He would have never believed that I would have even tried to start a business, that I would have landed an internship, that I would have gotten views on YouTube or started a podcast or invested, regardless of how much of a failure they were. That wasn't even in the cards for him. And so I realized that for the longest time, the enjoyment of the things that I was doing was predicated on whether or not it went well. And that's such a narrow mindset to have, isn't it? We can focus so much on the expectations that we've met that we can lose sight of the value that we gain from the expectations that we didn't meet. So if I had to have that conversation with him now, I would just tell him, don't yearn for the respect and praise of others. Yearn for the stories of epic failure that make everything that you learned valuable. Because in all reality, you're thinking getting smart is this daunting task. When in all reality, getting smart is incredibly easy. You just have to love to learn. And in my vision, loving learning is simply a willingness to set your expectations to the moon and screw it up royally. My expectations are just as high today as they were 4 years ago. The only difference is that today, failure is and always will be an option. I would rather set my bar too high and miss it 1,000 times over than set a bar too low and get praise for hitting it every single time. So put that bar up there. Put it as high as you can possibly reach. So high you can barely even see it. And keep it there. Don't you dare put it down. Because even if you miss, man, is that going to be a cool story to tell. Thank you.